Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Bobby Singer, the man, the myth, the legend. But before we launch into that, let's have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a fan since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012, have not stopped, love the boys, love Bobby, and I love doing continual panels.
And we love having all of you. Melissa.
I completely forgot my intro. Way to go, Melissa. Hi, I'm Melissa. I've been a fan since the pilot when it originally aired. So today, happy anniversary. And that's enough.
Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I too have been around since that first pilot originally aired. I love everything about the series, and I love talking about it.
Lola.
My name is Lola Laracy. I've been watching since the beginning. I love it, and Bobby may be my favorite character. There come my dogs. I heard you talking about dogs. There they go. I'm a writer, and that's all.
And Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I'm also a writer. I write the Menopausal Superhero series, and I'm, compared to all of you, very new to Supernatural. In fact, I haven't yet finished watching it. As of this morning, I have started season 11.
Enjoy the ride.
Oh, I am. It's been fun to have something that has so much of it that that I could, finally jump on the bandwagon for. I could always tell it was something I would like. It's just not something I had made time for when my television was limited to an hour a week.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand, which is how I ended up joining it halfway through season 11. I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all my modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. Like I said, I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months to get to the start of season 12 so I could live tweet. And the rest, as they say, is history. I fell down a very deep rabbit hole, and I hope I never hit bottom. So, Bobby Singer is an iconic character in Supernatural. There's just so much to say about him that we're on our second panel. And this time we're looking at the man, the myth, and the legend. So let's start with Bobby Singer, the man. What do we find out about Bobby over the course of our seasons? Because Bobby shows up in, I think, every season. So we get to see a lot of his character and get to know him better as time goes on. Carole, what comes to mind first when we mention Bobby?
Well, I love Bobby. I love how he, both in canon and outside of canon, becomes their surrogate father figure. At the very least, their honorary uncle. And he is unfailingly blunt. I mean, Bobby calls a spade. And he is learned, that more than you would think, because here he is with his beard and his, ball cap and his flannel, and he just looks like kind of, schlumpy junkyard owner. But Bobby speaks many languages, reads many languages, and nobody knows the lore like Bobby. So he is, I would kind of say, truly the Renaissance man.
Melissa.
Thank you. One of the things that we always in the show talks about, Bobby became a hunter when after Karen, his wife, was possessed. I'll challenge that. He became a hunter when he killed his father, because not all monsters are monsters. His father was a human monster and he killed him. And that is the moment when Bobby became a hunter. It's just, it took him all of those years to, when Karen was turned possessed, to actually fit the rest of the pieces of being a hunter into it. Now, I love Bobby, and definitely Bobby was a better father than John Winchester.
A+ parenting. Elektra.
What I really like about Bobby the man is the pride he takes in the fact that he raised the boys. When he finally gets to say that, you know, I raised 2 boys and they're good men. And just, you can hear it in his voice. And I don't know if that's Jim Beaver's acting or just what I'm reading into it, but that iconic moment where he lays claim to them and says, you know, that's what I've done. I've raised these boys and they're men, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of them. Everything else he's done, and he's done some great stuff, but he gave us the boys, and what they are, so much of it are the lessons that he's taught them by example. A lot of it is just by showing them how to be good people. I mean, with the skills they have, they could have turned out to not be good people.
Yeah. Carole, welcome. Carole Malcolm, welcome.
Thank you.
We are talking about Bobby Singer, the man, the myth, and the legend. Right now we're talking about the man. Please introduce yourself and give us one of your favorite Bobby, favorite things about Bobby, the man. We'll get to the legend and the myth later.
Okay. Yeah, it's the fact that he was such a good man made him a legend. Yeah, okay. Yes, hi, I'm Carole Malcolm. I'm the director of the Urban Fantasy Track at Dragon Con, and I have also been a Supernatural fan since it started. I've watched it all except Bugs. Another story for another time, but I've seen every episode multiple times, except never that one, and it's kind of my holdout. Yeah, Bobby's been one of my favorite characters for a very long time, and that's, you know, that's the reason season 7 was so difficult.
Mhm.
And I think that the reason that he appeals is because of his relationship with the guys, but also the fact that he can be so gruff on the outside, and yet we know that he's not really like that on the inside, or not completely. And he's got a great sense of humor, you know, all those kinds of things that you would like to have in someone that was helping with your kids, whether you were an absentee father like John Winchester, or if you were, anybody, if it was kind of like Uncle Bobby, he's the kind of person you would want hanging around. I mean, other than the heavy drinking and all, but that's another story. But I just think it's kind of the combination of those characteristics that make him so likable, and the fact that he's just so down to earth. He's grounded, even though he's part of the hunter life. He's also very grounded in kind of the everyday kind of things, and those are important for anybody to be part of, regardless of what you do for a living, or whatever your calling is.
Mm-hmm. Lola.
Well, so many things, but one thing I just thought of right now, he's selfless beyond the level that most people are. For instance, he sacrifices his own reputation to cover his hunter identity. He's known as the town drunk. So he does not have a good reputation in the place he lives. And he does that so that, people will turn a blind eye to him and excuse whatever weird stuff that's going on. So he doesn't give a flying F about the way he looks to people. He is just truly his own self, and he's authentic.
Good point. Samantha.
So Bobby reminds me of my uncles. I have a lot of uncles. Both my parents are from pretty big families, and my mom's one of the few women in the bunch. And I think the ways that Bobby reminds me of my uncles are both that gruff demeanor that, you know, hides that secret soft core. You know, I have, it might be because of my uncles that I have a fondness for those kinds of characters, those ones that are really gruff on the outside because they're so soft on the inside, they have to hide it or the world would eat them alive. And also, like my uncles, he's got a surprising set of skills and a very unassuming presence. Like, you know, he's a genius on a lot of fronts, but you just saw him walk down the street. There's nothing that announces that. And, you know, he only calls attention to his skills in the right setting. You know, he's not self-aggrandizing, but he's got an amazing skill set and so much knowledge. And he's that guy that, you know, you could bring up anything and he would be like, oh yes, I read that one. Did you read it in the original Greek? You know, yeah, but he's not that guy, right? He you know, he has that inside him, but he doesn't have that self-aggrandizement that you know, really puts me off in people. And I think in that way, he's, besides the gruff with the marshmallow at the center that I have a fondness for, is also the don't judge a book by its cover kind of person. Because, you know, if you're going to go with all of our stereotypes of what geniuses are like, they don't often look like Bobby.
Mm-hmm. And I really love that, as Supernatural has done with so many characters, what you see is not what you get. They could have played Bobby as a stereotypical redneck guy from rural South Dakota running a salvage yard, and no deeper than that. And that would have worked in many ways for the show. But we got so much more because they built that character to have so many different levels, and Bobby's not what you expect him to be. He's not a redneck. He's educated. He might be self-educated, but he still speaks multiple languages, reads multiple dead languages, and has an amazing library, as well as knows how to put cars together and take them apart. You know, the guy's just got so many layers. And I love that Supernatural does that in so many cases with the characters, so that we get a chance to know them with a level of depth that you often don't get in TV shows, even when they run for many seasons. So often there's no character growth at all. It's new episode, they're exactly who they were last week and last year and the year before that. And that isn't the case with Supernatural. We really get to see growth. Carole, it's been one of those days. I don't remember if I started with you or if I need to end this round with you.
You started with me. I'm always happy to speak more, but
well, before we move on to myth and legend, is there anything else anybody wants to add on, you know, Bobby Singer, the man? Go for it.
I think one thing they did really, really cleverly is that they didn't, you know, that he has all these layers, but they didn't expose them all at once. We didn't find out all about Bobby in the first, you know, season that we saw him. It was like, as the seasons went on, there would be a new layer and a new, you know, a new thing to discover, a new piece of his story or a new thing he could do that we were like, wow, I didn't know he could speak Japanese, you know, which was actually a real thing because Jim Beaver does speak Japanese. So the way they really took their time with unpacking it, I think really contributed to the depth of him as a character. It wasn't like, oh, look, he's marvelous and can do everything at once, and now we have a Deus Ex Machina, you know, for the rest of the show. It was like, oh, who knew this? I didn't know that. Did you know that? And so it was a very slow, gradual process, which just constantly added to the depth and realism of his character. And Jim Beaver, of course, just does a phenomenal job. You know,
and I think that makes it more realistic too. because
Absolutely.
most people that you know well, you don't learn everything about them in the first time you meet them, or even the first couple times. It takes, it takes a while. And
Mhm.
yet the weekend at Bobby's episode is so great in terms of seeing all the things that he does behind the scenes that we kind of had an inkling about, but we didn't know for sure all the different things. Because I remember the first time I saw it being just tickled by all the phones. I mean, we
Mhm.
knew he had to have some kind of network like that going on, but just to actually then see it,
Yeah.
it made it brought it more home to us too, I think.
They
Well,
all
Mhm.
had their little
initially,
masking tape on the handles to say which ones they
Right,
were.
right, for which one it is, yeah.
initially, he was only supposed to be in that one episode because otherwise they never would have named him Robert Singer. Um, so the first episode we see him in, we don't get all of the character because all of the character wasn't there yet. He was just so awesome they had to keep him.
And
Yeah,
fast
I,
They
forward,
couldn't, they,
fast forward 17 years to The Boys, he's in The Boys, and they still named him Robert Singer.
Robert thing. They
Uh,
couldn't get, what they wanted to do was continue with Missouri's character and have Missouri be a resource for the boys. But Loretta Devine was so tied up. I believe she was on Grey's Anatomy at that time, and they couldn't get any time with her. So instead, they were like, well, let's, the response to Bobby immediately was favorable. So they were like, well, let's just go ahead and go pursue this. And then, of course, yes, history, as they say, was made.
when I was
Well-
getting ready to be on this this panel today, I went back and watched the first episode he was in again, because I realized I couldn't really exactly remember his first entry into the show, and I wanted to go back and look at it. And I see what you're saying, that like he wasn't set up as a character that we were going to keep on seeing. There was nothing in that episode that said, watch this guy, he'll be back a lot. It
Right.
felt like just one of those hunters, because we meet a lot of them in the show, where you meet a hunter and maybe they die or maybe they help the boys and they move on and we don't hear anything about them for a long time. There are a lot of hunter characters that never became really big in the show. And I think that's what I thought Bobby would be when I met him in that episode. I didn't really pay attention to him the same way. But in rewatching it today, it was fun how many little hints were already in there of like history. We get told about in that first episode, we find out that the last time he saw John and the boys, he cocked a shotgun at John. And that's a story that I wanted more of immediately. So there, even in that first episode, when they thought he wasn't going to be back, they still gave us little hints of all that history in him.
And out of so many possibilities, I want to know exactly what John did to provoke that, because there's so
could have been many.
There are
I'm
a
still
number,
waiting
it's
to hear
addressed
how
in a
many
number of
Lola are.
stories.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of,
Melissa,
oh, sorry.
you're
You're
muted,
on
hon.
mute.
He deserved it. It doesn't matter what John did. He deserved it.
Could have been any number of things. Well, that explains a lot, that he wasn't, that I had not realized that he was not expected to become more of a series regular. He was not exactly a regular, but he was more than just a recurring character. So for a while anyway, because it seemed to me as though, and I can't remember which season was that, Samantha, that he first showed up in. It was one of the first
It was
few.
right at the end of season 1.
Okay. And, when it seemed to me as though when he first showed up, the guys acted as though they didn't know who he was, or they weren't that familiar with him. And I thought that was
it seemed
odd
like Dean
because,
remembered him decently well, but maybe Sammy had been too little. He didn't remember him, or he wasn't there at that moment.
yeah, it just seemed as though he didn't have the same kind of impact, or they didn't feel quite the connection to him that they obviously really would have, which became evident in later episodes. And the whole thing about the one episode with the Christmas, was it an ornament or something like that, that was something that Dean had made for Sam when they were kids, And when they were talking about it, he said something about, well, Uncle Bobby made it. And I thought, but you guys didn't hang around. I just remember being confused at the time. So
That's the Samulet. That's the
that
Samulet.
was that what it
Amulet.
was? Okay.
Yeah.
But it had something to do with Bobby. So that's why
Yeah.
I remember being surprised, because I thought, but you just said that, you didn't really know who he was anyway. Anyway, but we love Bobby. That's all we care about.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, I think everybody's had people that came in and out of their lives when they were kids, and maybe they didn't understand the dynamics that was going on with the adults, that the adults were on the outs, or they were on the ins, or, somebody moved
Yeah, well,
away,
that's true.
something happened. You just know they were around and then they aren't, and nobody ever explains it to you.
And especially in Sam and Dean's life, that's the story of their life. People come and go, and then nobody even comments on the fact that they have come and gone. They just do, and people disappear and people appear, and that's par for the course for them.
So depending on how long ago that incident was with running John off with a shotgun and what it was over, and fan fiction tends to assume John was being rough with the boys and Bobby gave him what for. Dean might remember him, a little iffy, and Sam might have just remembered that they always had a good time because Uncle Bobby had a lot of books, and we don't know how long it's been. Lola, did you want to add something here?
You're muted.
Okay, I remember I was reading the wiki, and I think somewhere in here it mentions that Bobby was pissed because John left the boys with him for a month. So that's why I was mad.
That is pushing the limits of friendship, isn't it?
Yeah, and
but
being a
that's-
good parent.
But John
That's
was
not run him off with a shotgun. That's because Bobby would have known what the boy's life is like. If John parked the boys there with him for a month, that's not why John got the shotgun out.
Okay.
That's not why Bobby got the shotgun out. That I know that's what the wiki said because I read it too, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that was never put
Does
in
seem to
canon.
stretch. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. I think
No,
Bobby would have been
because
glad to
Bobby
have
would
the boys.
They would have been safer with him than whatever John was doing.
and better that than a motel.
Yeah, or
Where he
a lot.
often left them with, John Winchester, A+ parenting.
But I could see John, since he didn't want them to play or have any fun, to just do drills, I could see them throwing hands over that, with Bobby telling him to back the F off and John telling him it's my son's butt out.
Well,
And
we even see a hint of that when Bobby is going through his memories, when the Reaper is kind of trying to say, you've got to go now. And he's still going through his memories when he takes Dean out and starts throwing a ball with him. And Dean's like, well, we're supposed to be doing shotgun practice. And Bobby's like, yeah, well, today you're just going to be a kid and we're going to throw a ball around.
Right.
Like kids do. And so that's the kind of thing where they really intimate that Bobby wanted their lives to be a little more balanced and have some normalcy. And John would have nothing of it. And that's where I could see John saying, what do you mean you didn't do the drills? You're supposed to, they don't have time to go throwing balls around. They've got to go and, kill the demon someday. That would piss him off enough that then Bobby could be like, get the heck off my, get off my lawn.
Off my lawn.
Yeah.
well, and from the glimpse we get of Bobby's own dad, there wasn't a whole lot of ball playing involved. He didn't get that kind of relationship as a kid. And in fact, we see a flashback of Bobby and Karen really on the brink of breaking up because she wants children and he doesn't want to repeat. He's so afraid he's going to repeat the sins of his father that he doesn't want the responsibility of being a father. And yet, he raised 2 boys and they turned out to be heroes. So that's such wonderful validation. And that goes back to that depth for the character. To weave that kind of storytelling in is just amazing. And it gives us so much more. It just makes Bobby so much more real as a person.
That's a pretty classic trope, though. The guy that's afraid to have children because he had a problem dad, and he's therefore scared to have children. I mean, that's almost the basis for the entire TV series, This Is Us,
Mhm.
where the main
It's no
dad
small
is scared
thing,
to have his
breaking
own kid.
cycles of abuse. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole show does have underlying themes on intergenerational trauma. And, that's pretty clear.
Of both varieties, the supernatural and the mundane. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, John doesn't know what happened to Henry. He thinks Henry just abandoned him. We know that Henry died decades into the future saving Sam and Dean, but that didn't help John as a kid, or whatever happened to John's mom.
Yep, dad just kissed him goodbye, said he would see him tomorrow, and he was gone.
And then
Yeah.
John does something similar to his own children.
Well, those cycles again.
Yeah.
What, Melissa? Wait.
It's
It's a theme.
It's a big, yeah.
Well, it's kind of hard when you've got these 2 strong, important figures in the boys' lives. It's really hard not to compare the parenting of John and Bobby, and they were very, very different. And it's really hard not to compare them. And what we see on screen, John doesn't fare as well,
Mhm.
or maybe
Yeah.
that's just me.
I have to laugh because I had an uncle who actually did call people idiots. So
Oh, that's funny.
he was World War II generation, not Vietnam, but he actually did call people idiots. So I've got to admit that also endears Bobby to me.
Sorry, when they do reruns of Supernatural on TNT, they have all the major cast members introduce it, including Baby. And Jim
Oh.
Beaver sits there in a t-shirt that says idiots on it.
I didn't know that.
Oh.
Cool. Okay.
That's really cool. Well, before we move on to myth and legend, there's the Bobby and Rufus hunting partnership, which I really wish we could have gotten to see more of.
Well,
Thoughts
whatever
on-
happened in Omaha,
Right.
that canned that idea.
Mhm.
I never want to know. I want that to be
Something
murky.
said-
It was bad, whatever it was.
I
Yeah.
thought at some point we found out that there was a mistake or something that Rufus blamed Bobby on, and Rufus's daughter got killed because of it. Whether that was on a hunt or
I remember
because,
something about his daughter.
yeah,
wasn't that in the episode with the earworms things?
The conworm.
Up there.
The convent,
Yeah.
yep.
When Rufus died, actually,
Yeah.
which I thought was unfortunate that it had to, be done that way, that it was, one of arguably probably the longest and best friends that Bobby had of, someone who was more or less a contemporary of his, not son figures, but, someone who was a friend that had shared experiences in terms of, what it was like being a hunter, and Rufus was he was a fun character. So
Yes.
but I thought it was unfortunate that he had to die the way that he did. So thanks a lot, Supernatural.
They had such great chemistry, and all
Yeah.
the scenes that they shared, whether we're talking about flashback scenes or the ones that they got to be contemporary, it just, you could feel the history and connection between them. And even when they were so angry with each other, they were angry with each other because it started from this heart of really strong friendship and love.
Right,
And
because they cared. Yeah.
Right. And then it really foils well with Sammy and Dean, that in some ways they feel like the older version of Sammy and Dean. It's not a perfect parallel, you know, they're not the same relationship, but there are definitely some same notes in those two relationships.
That would definitely have been something I would have loved to see be pursued as canon, but at least certainly in fan fiction, there's a lot of that. I mean, Rufus is just so popular. He's such a great character, and they gave us enough in canon to build on, because we see him, there's the great flashback scenes in the house where Dean gets trapped.
Yeah.
You know, and so we see Bobby and Rufus kind of echoing in the past, and, you know, Weekend at Bobby's, and we have a lot of material to build on with Rufus and extrapolate what his relationship and experiences with Bobby could have and were. But yeah, that was that's a gift, those two together.
I just
It
want to
would have
bring
been cool.
a cobbler that isn't covered with blood. I mean, don't you just want to make sure he gets his cobbler?
Extra iron.
Ew. Ew.
No, it's cherries, not blood.
Yeah, it's not a peach cobbler, it's peach Melba cobbler.
That's right. That's right.
Word.
Wood chipper surprise.
Oh, God.
Oh, we lost Melissa.
We got Carole with that one.
Yeah, that was,
But well, the look on that poor lady's face after she'd been throwing herself at Bobby for the
Priceless.
entire episode, and then
Just priceless.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was, you know, but with all of the things that had gone wrong between Bobby and Rufus, it's Rufus who comes to guide Bobby to the afterlife. Rufus is his psychopomp, and that's so fascinating to me, that this was a friendship that no matter what went wrong later, that's quite a connection to be the person sent to take you on.
And it was so touching to see that, you know, to see
Yeah.
Rufus be the one where we're like, oh, and we're surprised because they left it on not great terms, but then it's like, oh, of course, you know, of course it would be Rufus. You know, they have
Right.
the bond was clear enough to see, and it's lovely.
And they're still kind of sniping at each other, even when they're both dead. You know?
Well,
That is so
some
typical,
things
though. I
never
mean,
change.
yeah, guys, they don't talk like women do. Trash talking and jibing at each other and all of that, that's their affection. You know,
Right.
we're like, oh, you know, your hair looks so nice today. And they're like, you know, making rude comments about each other's junk. So that's just how they operate.
Yeah. Yeah, there was still clearly affection there, even if life had kind of gotten in the way, because a lot of that stuff I assume wouldn't matter after you're dead. Perspective.
Mhm.
So the myth and legend part, they kind of go hand in hand depending on who's telling the story. What do you think is part of the Bobby Singer myth and legend? Elektra?
Well, he is the master of the lore. The first time we really get deep
Mhm.
into Bobby is when they call him because they don't know what the heck they're dealing with or what the heck to do. I mean, we've seen him before, but we really get Bobby in Tall Tales when they don't know what's going on, and Bobby shows up and says, it's a trickster and this is what you need to do, because they're flailing. And he is the one with the answers. And this is where we see Bobby is the one where when the boys can't solve something, he's the guy that has the answers and knows what's going on. And that's a role he will fulfill for them time and time again from that point on.
Yeah, he is the guy the go-to guy for answers, because if Bobby doesn't have a clue about what's going on, we are all screwed. And
He'll
fortunately,
find it, but
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, it kind of goes into what I was saying before about his unassuming presentation, is like he has so much knowledge and so much personal history. You know, it's not just what he learned from books, but also what he learned from his own hunting life and the things he's encountered. And it's like, you know, when you're talking to your grandpa, or, you know, in my case, talking to your grandpa, and he's just this nice old guy who gives you candy when your mom's not looking, and you find out that he was on Normandy Beach, and you're like, what? You know, Bobby puts that off that a lot for me, that like he's not talking about all the amazing things in his past. He's not going to brag, but they're there. And when his knowledge is useful to somebody, he's right there sharing it, and still not bragging about how he got that knowledge and what he survived to get there. And that's amazing to me, that somebody could amass his kind of skills and knowledge and history and still stay grounded and not become full of himself in bad ways. But maybe that's also why he survived.
yeah. I
Well,
want
as long as he did.
he had Rufus to keep him grounded for a long time, with the two of them arguing back and forth over how many times did you bless it or dip it in holy water or whatever to make it proper and right so that you could kill the whatever it was with it. There were all the complicated things to kill the Japanese vampire, and Rufus didn't do it quite right, so it came back.
Right.
Yeah. I want to know.
Times, not 5.
Yeah, I want to know the story on how Bobby acquired his library. What hunters did he gain that from? Was he the guy that everybody left their lore books to? Did he, what's the story there? And in my headcanon, the boys went back to the house when they could after it burned and got out as many of the books as they could once they had the bunker to put them in. Just like I'm convinced if there was anything left of the Campbell Library, they also rescued it, because why wouldn't you? Those books, you know, they're not on Kindle Unlimited.
Or at all.
You'd be surprised how many grimoires actually are.
Oh,
But still.
In my headcanon, Gail, they have friends that will have access to some of the rare book collections in some of the universities, and somebody's gone through some of them with a Xerox machine and made them copies.
Or pilfered out the ones that really shouldn't be in the hands of the general public.
And slipped them out. But
Mhm.
I have a copy of a very old, the first cookbook from like the 1300s. And that's how I got a copy. Was a friend got permission to go into the rare book collection, and she made a Xerox. And then I got a copy. And that was 20, 30 years ago. But we all passed around copies of this book because we were all interested in old cooking.
Mhm.
But that's what you do. Somebody gets a copy of it, and the people who need that research material share it around.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
I want to know. I really want to know. So Bobby is running the junkyard, right? So he's got this hands ability, right? That's cars. That's a physical thing. And then Karen gets, you know, that whole thing happens, and Rufus teaches him to hunt. And he's not just a hunter. He becomes immersed in this lore. Where did that curiosity, because he didn't need to know all the stuff that he knew. He didn't need to amass the library that he amassed to be a successful hunter. He took that and went down a rabbit hole, a deeper rabbit hole than yours, Gail, in terms of like, he just went with it. So it's curious to me, because on one hand, we have him with this really physical job, and on the other hand, we see that he had this great craving and desire for knowledge, and just this thirst and this hunger and this really deep research ability. And it's like, I want to know, I want to see how that happened. because
Well-
I bet there is hints of that in his past. That's why I really wanted a young Bobby, young Rufus. I would have loved to have seen that, because I would have loved to have seen like why Bobby decided to go the automotive physical route, because clearly he's got the brains and the intellect and the desire, the curiosity. So what happened there?
It could be kind of like a Sam thing, because Sam was in college and he had his career, he's going to be a lawyer, everything was set, and then he got pulled back into hunting. And with Bobby, you know, he's had a rough life. He had to kill his father. And I think he was in the middle. Wasn't he in Vietnam? Did we say he was in Vietnam? I can't remember. He was in.
I'm not sure.
But anyways, you know, he's had a rough life. And sometimes when you have a rough life, you get derailed. So maybe somewhere in an alternate universe, there's, you know, the scarf wearing Bobby, who, you know, looks like he's on GQ and he got a professorship at Harvard, you know, so it's just circumstances.
Well,
Excuse me for 1 second. Carole,
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you to write that AU where the Rich Chesters, and we have our Rich Chester Bobby. Please and thank you.
Robert, I think you would be
Got it.
Robert. I'm sure.
Robert.
Or Rob, maybe Rob.
Robert.
Rob,
some
yeah,
sort of
that-
flashback.
Rob.
It looks
We
like
get
the
it.
one at Biltmore with all the wood and the paintings and the, you know, but it's all occult books. Yes, yes. I
Okay.
think we need that.
But
I
if,
kind of,
if
I'm sorry.
when John Winchester finds out about the monsters and he starts journaling in that book that's so important to the boys through this whole series, what if John Winchester hadn't had the children to take care of? Bobby, when he found out he didn't have kids, and he was able to take that same curiosity that John had about this whole new world, and he fell down the research black hole that so many of us do when we find things we're interested in. Maybe
I think-
Winchester would have been Bobby if he didn't have the boys.
And I've met people who, for whatever circumstance, couldn't go on to college, couldn't leave the family, didn't have the money, but they were smart and they were curious, and there was a library. And it is impressive what someone with curiosity and intelligence can teach themselves
Mhm, oh,
armed
yeah.
with public resources. And I think, you know, Bobby could have been Sam as a kid, always with a book in his hand, always, you know, asking why. Except he's Sam that didn't get the chance to even do a few years at Stanford.
He may
You know,
not
when
have
we-
been- oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When we have our flashback where we go all the way back to Bobby's childhood and we, you know, see the moments that lead up to him killing his dad, there's a little bit of that vibe in there, I think. You know, his dad seems very concerned that he's not manly enough. And given the kind of dad that we saw there, I could see the problem being that he's bookish and quiet, that he wants to go in his room and read, and his dad sees that as being sissy, you know. So I think it could very well be something that was just in him from the start. And like Gail said, if he'd had a different childhood, he might well have become a famous scholar, just because he has that thirst for learning and the doggedness that scholarship requires in him from the very beginning. And you know, and like I think it was Carole who was saying, what if he didn't have the boys? Or was that Elektra? I forgot which one of you said that. Yeah, because, you know, Bobby, you know, he lived a pretty lonely life. And, you know, when I get to be alone, which doesn't happen that often because I have children and dogs, but when I get to be alone, you know what I do? I read. And I bet Bobby does too.
Well, I think in answer to your original question, Gail, and kind of building on what Melissa said, it strikes me that probably the reason that he went the route that he did, that he amassed this library, that I think he was doing what he did, kind of, he was fulfilling the vision of what he saw his place within Hunter Society, because he was getting older. He was older than a lot of the, you know, the people who were doing it at the time. You know, it's a little bit of a slightly younger person's game anyway at that point. If this was something he could do as support, it's like, okay, well, if they needed somebody who, you know, what, because at this time they didn't have access to the bunker, you know, and all of that. So, you know, at that time it was, you know, why not have some, you know, some kind of support system that's still actively involved in what's going on, but he's able to work behind the scenes and provide that support. And that's the perfect kind of job for someone, as Samantha was saying, who has those inclinations to begin with. You know, it's a good way for him to be able to contribute to the hunter system as a whole, not just to Sam and Dean, but, you know, for everyone, because, you know, Garth makes it very clear to him, clear to the guys after Bobby dies, that we all lost him. It wasn't just you. You know, now they may have had a particular relationship with him that maybe the others didn't, but it was still, you know, it was still a loss to everyone because of the fact that he provided that kind of support for them.
Can't you see him just being like, you know, you never know when someone's going to need something translated from ancient Sumerian. I'd better learn that this summer. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got some spare days. I may as well learn that language.
I finished the panic room. What next?
Right. Yeah.
I even kind of wonder if it's simply because his life never demanded it until that point. He, you know, he just grew up, you know, he meets Karen and, you know, they're married and he's happy and he's running his salvage yard and he just isn't looking for more. But when she dies and he's pushed into this world, he may have found, oh, I actually have a knack for this. I'm actually good at this. And may even have found that thirst inside himself that he simply had never had a chance to explore before. You know, and it could almost have been a surprise to him, you know, where it's like, oh, this is really cool. Let me learn this just because I want to learn it, and not just because, you know, what can I tell somebody? But he just may never even have thought about doing something like that because his life never required that kind of intellectual pursuit or push.
Or at least not that rigorous anyway.
No, exactly. And if you think about it, running a successful salvage yard takes a certain amount of organization and intelligence. If you're going to sell things for parts, you have to know what parts are there and which parts are still good, and have an inventory of what is out in that chaos that looks like a rusting junk heap. And where is that, you know, 1996 Nova? And where, you know, where can you find those parts? Because otherwise you don't have anything to sell to make money. And so he was a successful businessman, even though we tend to think of the salvage yard as kind of a cover for everything else he was doing. So maybe his first love was cars. You know, knowing everything about cars, knowing what their blue book value was, knowing, you know, what all the parts were. And I've met people. Yeah, I've met people at car shows who are like that. Some people know baseball stats, some people know cars. And
maybe that's why he was so friendly with John. Because John could take a car apart and put it back together.
Yeah, John had been a mechanic.
I've got a question for the group. There seems to be so much interest in seeing a younger Bobby and Rufus in that partnership. Is there any reason to think that that isn't something that we are at some point going to see with the Winchesters?
It could be.
Good point. Good point.
It would be interesting.
I would love it, but I don't know if, you know, I don't know if they'd have the broad appeal for the rest of the world, but I think we would love it.
There's enough appeal that they're doing another series.
And I didn't ask for that. They didn't ask me.
But not a series based on two guys.
They could be,
They could have had
incidental characters that show up in a couple of episodes to answer a question or save their butts when they don't know what they're doing.
They could have moved forward when Rufus and Bobby met and had them young hot guys, and that would have been cool.
Aldous Hodge. Aldous Hodge, Rufus.
I think we'll have to wait and see, but that
Bobby
could,
and Rufus as young hot guys, that would fit in really well with what they're doing.
mhm. Yeah.
I'd rather have that than the Winchesters.
Well, good time. We're gonna wait.
I know.
Yep.
We're gonna wait, see how things go. I'm looking forward to it. All right, folks. So the legend. What do you think? You know, at one point Sam asks Dean if anybody's going to remember them, what their legacy is going to be. What do you think Bobby's legacy was? And did it outlive Sam and Dean? Because he certainly touched more people than just them. Anybody?
Well, I think it was what I mentioned just before, just a little bit ago, that he was a support system for so many. And we remember him, you know, because what we mostly saw him in was his relationship, you know, with the Winchesters and, you know, with that family and you know, what he meant to them. And so our perspective is somewhat skewed in that direction just because that was, you know, how the character was presented to us. But even though we know that there was a lot more to it. And I think that, you know, really that was his legacy, that he, you know, he got this network, which if there was a network of hunters before him, it seemed as though it was more hit and miss, you know, because now it was like he would call people if you know, okay, there's a job here kind of thing. Stuff that Garth was doing after Bobby died, that, you know, he kind of got things, people were more connected. Hunters weren't just these fly-by-nights that maybe never even, you know, met each other. And some of them probably never did, but at least they had some kind of an organization so that it was possible that you would have at least heard of someone. Like how many times did we hear about Garth before we met him?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. So just as an example. So, but I think that was part of his legacy in terms of what he meant to all of them. I mean, you know, just in general to everyone was setting that up and getting that going and making it evident that they really needed something like that in the first place because it helps them all survive.
Well, and folks, I think this means we need a third Bobby panel because we are out of time. So let's quickly give everybody how to find you online. And we're going to have to say goodnight for this one. Carole, Malcolm, start us out.
Yes, you can go to Facebook, look up Dragon Con Urban Fantasy. It'll take you right to the track page, which does stay active all year long. I haven't quite gotten geared up yet since Dragon Con's only been over for a week, but you know, I do still try to keep that alive all year long. We do have the YouTube channel with all of the Supernatural Rewind episodes where we did one for each season. Plus some other supernatural content, other media content, author interviews, all of that. And if you just go to YouTube and look up Dragon Con Urban Fantasy, you'll find us.
Awesome. Elektra?
Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer. I'm an editor. You can find anything you need to know about me at untilmidnight.com.
Awesome. Lola?
I'm Lola Larsey. I'm all over the internet. You can Google me. You're going to find me or a bunch of dead old ladies who I'm related to.
Okay.
That's become my tagline. I just say it every time, but it's true. I do it. I Google myself every once in a while. I'm like, yeah, it's my relative. That's
A
my
bunch of obituaries.
in-law. Yeah, it's all me or Aunt Lola or Grandmother Lola. Yeah.
Samantha?
I'm Samantha Bryant, and you can find me at samanthabryant.com because I'm just that creative with my website. And I also play around a lot on Instagram. If you like pictures of mushrooms and small dogs, you can find me there at Samantha B Writer, just the letter B in the middle.
Okay. Melissa?
You can find me stalking writers on AO3 or Kitty and I causing mayhem on Twitter. Be a Dean's girl.
Carole Stokes.
I'm here on Facebook. You'll see me a lot in the TFWNC group. You'll see me on a lot of continual panels. On Twitter, you can find me as true_firesign10. And all of my fic is on AO3 under firesign10. Mind the tags.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, but mostly I'm here on Continual. So thank you all so much for another wonderful discussion. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll be back with more Supernatural soon, so we'll see you online.